Celebrating 44 years on the air, Farm Week is a production of Mississippi State University Extension.
Today on Farm Week, when it comes down to wildfires, 2020 will be one for the record books. In southern gardening, when you're looking for the perfect fall color, Gary Bachman says mum's the word. In the markets, Zach has another one of his epic reports and a flurry of expert analysts to go along with it. And in our feature, we go from floods to making the Mississippi River deeper. Farm Week starts right now. Hello everybody, I'm Mike Russell. Good to have you with us today on Farm Week. In the newswire, wildfires still being fought and Congress still talking about why and how. Recently, the House Subcommittee on Conservation and Forestry, chaired by Abigail Spanberger, held a hearing. Deputy Chief of Forestry John Phipps told her that under current forestry management strategy, on average, more than 5 times as many trees crowd every acre compared to before the land was settled.
You gave the number 64 trees per acre before settlement. Now it's up to 320. Just to ensure that I've understood and the rest of the committee is following along, that's because natural fires that were coming through would have processed and would have taken out trees over time so that we were at that natural rate of 64. Is that what you're stating?
That's exactly right, Chair Spanberger. In a way, the way these forests evolved with fire, and fire did the work.
Meanwhile, Phipps says conditions are ideal for wildfires to continue.
When that happens under the right conditions, there's no stopping it, basically. We're there to help people get out of the way. There's just tragic loss of life, and these fires burn at high severity, and it's just really a bad trajectory that we're on, and it's going to take really a paradigm shift in thinking.
That paradigm may include allowing natural fires to thin the forest. And by the way, in 2020 so far, more than 43,000 fires have burned more than 7 million acres in the U.S. Reuters reports that pork exports have surged beyond pre-trade war levels despite the COVID slowdown. Major producers say they have shipped more pork to China this past year than 2017. JBS reports a 370% increase, most of it due to China's African swine fever outbreak. Most products the company shipped were feet and livers, which Americans generally don't eat. In Mississippi, sweet potatoes are a staple crop at this year's harvest, looking fairly average according to MSU Extension. The biggest challenge, harvesting with COVID in the air. Sweet potatoes are still picked by hand, so workers have to take extra precautions these days. By the way, the USDA's CFAP2 program includes sweet potatoes under specialty crops in the vegetable category. On the lighter side, mum's the word, according to horticulturist Gary Bachman. In this week's Southern Gardening, he showcases mums and marimums. Gary says you can't beat them for fall color. Here's Gary.
It's the fall season, and it's time for a great duo of colorful plants. Today, Southern Gardening is at Pine Hills Nursery enjoying the colorful fall mums and marigolds, also called marimums. Fall mums, short for chrysanthemum, are a stress-free way to add color to the fall landscape. It's easy to see why, as there are more flowers than you could possibly count. The selection of colors can almost seem limitless, from rustic earth tones to bright and cheery pastels. Choosing fall mums in full flower will have an instant impact for any autumn get-together or event. However, I like to select plants that still have tight buds and are just starting to show color. This increases the period of showy display as the buds begin to open in the garden. There's been a long-standing practice in southern states of planting marigolds for the fall season. This is due to their non-stop color display of earthy and warm colors that are perfect for any autumnal decoration and display. Fall planted marigolds also have a special name, mums. I like them because their color lasts longer than the garden mums. There are a couple of types that are perfect for the fall landscape. My favorites are the French marigolds, with autumnal colors on single and double flowers. The other type is the African marigold. The double flowers look like colorful yellow and orange pom-poms in the garden. Adding fall mums and mums to your landscape will create a bright color splash. I'm horticulturist Gary Bachman, and I'll see you next time on Southern Gardening.
We'll take a short break right here, but stick around. Coming up in our Farm Week feature, we go from floods to making the Mississippi River deeper. It's one of the most important rivers in the world, and now deeper water means bigger ships moving far more goods through it. Imagine being able to carry 500,000 more bushels of soybeans on one ship. And here's the kicker, it's good for the environment. A river deep, mountain high. That's coming up on Farm Week. Don't go away.
At Mississippi State University, Extension is reaching beyond the college campus and impacting adult education. We're instructing agricultural professionals on the latest trends in research and technology, inspiring communities, empowering small businesses, and promoting the growth of healthy families where youth and adults can reach their fullest potential.
The MSU Extension Service, sharing our vision for the future.
ATVs are a ton of fun for people of all ages, but these powerful machines can also be a ton of trouble if safety guidelines aren't followed. Never carry more than one person on a single ride or four-wheeler. The four-wheeler can become unstable and very dangerous. ATVs are designed for off-road use only. Never drive one on a highway or any other paved surface, and always ride the right size machine at the right speed. This message brought to you by MSU Extension 4-H.
It's a simple idea. Knowledge that transforms lives shouldn't be limited to those on a campus, but extended to any and all who want or need it, wherever they are. At Mississippi State University, we've been making that possible for more than 100 years through the MSU Extension Service. What began as an effort to extend the latest research to farmers has become something much more. Today, we're helping Mississippians from all walks of life, giving them the tools they need to build a brighter future. We're sparking the imagination of students around the state and inspiring the next generation of doctors. We're helping rural communities find their way to the internet and connect to the world at large. And we're teaching families how to lead healthier lives in ways both big and small. MSU is standing firm in its commitment to that one simple idea: extend the knowledge that transforms lives wherever they are.
Time now for the markets, always in a whirlwind. Zach Ashmore here with another epic report. Zach?
Thanks, Mike. Markets reflecting harvest news as it comes. That on top of the USDA's quarterly stocks report making waves. Let's take a look. Last week's biggest gain, grains and feed. Wheat, soybeans, and corn all jumping up in a big way. Wheat got it best, jumping 29.25 cents. We'll get to why in just a moment. Last week's biggest loss, lumber, but not by much, $3.80. I know you see a lot of red, but those losses were quite small, mostly a cent or two. Last week, the USDA released its latest quarterly stocks report on row crops. These reports can heavily affect the markets, and boy, did this one do exactly that. In short, it says corn stocks down 10% from September last year, soybean stocks down 42%, and wheat stocks down 8%. The result? Well, you just saw it. Futures for those crops jumped up, particularly soybeans, after quite a fall last week. Market analysts Ted Seifert, Naomi Bloom, Matt Bennett, and Elaine Cubb give their thoughts.
So the way that we interpret this quarterly grain stocks report and then move it over to the WASDE report that we're going to see next, that's going to be the question. Now, we know that beginning stocks are going to be less for corn and soybeans. That is a given. That is not something where the USDA can temper that or whatever. No, those are the numbers that are going to be used. So we know that means less supply coming in. The question is what happens on the demand side of the equation. And I have to argue that there is no downside potential for demand on the soybean balance sheet whatsoever. You cannot reduce crush. You cannot reduce exports. If anything, I think it is reckless of the USDA not to increase exports by at least 50, if not 100 million bushels. And I would even be fine with them justifying 150 million bushels. So then we're going to look at yield. So there's going to be a lot of moving parts on this report. We know what beginning stocks are. Estimates for demand and yield are going to be the next big ones. So we tend to have this thing where we get a really bullish stocks report, and then we follow up with really bullish expectations for a WASDE report, and we tend to get a little bit disappointed. I like the fact that this one's going to be on a Friday, because even if these numbers don't hit the bullish expectations that the market's going to have, I think we got the weekend to think about it and come back and then on Monday say, well, you know what, maybe the carryover for soybeans wasn't quite as bullish as we had hoped for, but it's still a really bullish number, and it's getting more and more bullish by the day.
I agree with Ted, and if the USDA does increase the export demand by 100 million bushels on top of this lower carry number that we're going to see, then you got carryout numbers coming in closer to 300 million bushels, and that's without even adjusting yield. So what it does is it keeps the soybean prices in a very firm sideways trading pattern, and now all of the market is going to be continuing to eye demand. It's going to be watching then, of course, South American weather. And now South America has the hard pressure of producing a perfect crop, and there can be no weather issues, because if there are, then you have another reason for markets to finally get through that 1050 resistance level on the monthly charts, and we're on the way to higher prices.
You look at the dryness in Argentina, you look at issues we've had in Brazil, there's no doubt that you could be looking at a long time, late February maybe, before we see a lot of exports coming out of that part of the world. And so if the Chinese are buying soybeans, and no one really knows exactly what they're going to do, but we feel pretty strongly that they're going to be, in my opinion, there's no doubt. Now, what's the other thing that could do so? I agree with Ted and Naomi. Bottom line for me, if this yield comes in a half bushel or a bushel below last month, Katie bar the door. It's going to start getting really interesting. So, you know, our official estimate was closer to 300 than 400 million bushel. I'll tell you that right now. And I know that, you know, whenever you put that estimate out, to me, you don't know what the USDA is going to say. You're trying to figure out, you know, where are they going to come in? But bottom line is we're trying to throw out the number that we feel is going to be closest to what we think we're going to end up at. And I think we're going to end up closer to 300 than 400 for sure.
You know, the number that keeps in my mind when I think about these ending stocks that we're forward projecting here is a 10% stocks to use ratio. That tends to be sort of the rule of thumb, where if the market has more than 10% leftover inventory, the grain industry tends to feel like that's okay, we can get by. But if you start to get less than 10% left over in the system, all of a sudden the industry starts to get really nervous about having enough supply, and then you do start to have price rationing. And with soybeans, we're very close to there already, and with all of these changes that Ted and Naomi and Matt have suggested, it's very likely that they could get below that when we go forward into the next supply and demand table. So soybeans have a really interesting bullish prospect. In contrast that with corn, which has the exact opposite thing going on, where you have sufficient stocks to use ratio still and prospects for bearish changes in the usage categories going forward.
In addition, I sat down with MSU Extension row crop economist Will Maples to get his thoughts as well. So, Will, last week the USDA released their quarterly grain stocks report, which showed that corn, soybeans, and wheat are all down compared to last year. Now, this seems to have influenced the markets. What's your take on this situation?
You're right, Zach. That report, in that report, corn stocks were down about 10%, wheat down 8%, soybeans down nearly 42% from where we were sitting this time last year. And the market reacted very positively. I mean, prices were up Friday whenever that report came out, and mainly because anytime we can get stocks knocked down, the market's going to react positively as far as price goes. It's a basic supply and demand situation. You know, when we have high levels of stocks, that means we got too much supply. If we can knock those down, prices are going to react to that. We still, even though they're down, we still have a lot of corn and soybeans in our stocks. I mean, soybeans were down 42%, but we were coming off a record high of nearly 1 billion bushels of soybeans sitting in stocks. So we're down to about 500 million bushels of soybeans now, which is still more than we usually have in stocks, but as sitting where we were last year, it's looking a lot better for the market.
Moving on to cattle futures, prices on the move these past few weeks, both up and down. That's not unusual, but what is? The industry's recovery from COVID, that and increased China exports. I sat down with livestock economist Josh Maples to find out more. Cattle market futures prices have shown strength recently. What is driving these prices?
Yeah, that's a good point, Zach. And there's not a single clear answer, just like any other time you're trying to analyze, what's going on in futures markets. But much of the increase happened in July and in early August, where we saw cattle futures prices run up pretty sharply. And I think the biggest thing, especially during that time period, is the market was recovering from a really uncertain time, and so that continued recovery allowed the market to get over some of that uncertainty about what was going to happen. And so I think that was a big piece of the rally that we saw in the market during that time period. And then, you've also got the classic other fundamental things. Beef demand, despite the challenges during the year, has been strong. And then you also look at the feedstuff prices. We've still got relatively cheap grains. And so all of these things are positives for cattle prices, I think have contributed to the rally that we've seen over the last couple of months. And so we're certainly in a more improved price situation, definitely than we were in the spring, but probably even better than a lot of folks expected just a couple of months ago.
I do know that recently China has been importing a lot of grains and meat from the United States, and I do know that they've imported probably more pork and chicken than anything else. But have beef imports to China increased significantly, or have they pretty much stayed stable?
They have increased significantly. It depends on how do you interpret that word exactly. They were pretty low to start with. We just don't send a whole lot of beef to China. But with that being said, based on the little amount that we do send, we've grown that sharply. So it's still, a relatively small portion of our total beef exports go to China, but that small portion is growing fairly rapidly. So it's a very positive thing for the industry, and hopefully that number will continue to grow, and we'll be able to send even more beef to China moving forward.
Speaking of livestock, the dairy industry's seen big gains these past few weeks. Part of that due to high cheese demand, another part higher exports. Analyst Naomi Bloom tells us more.
We actually have some possible continued upside for the milk prices. It's really exciting right now in dairy country because we have really fantastic, strong cheese demand. Part of it is because of the government buying program that's been going on that pushed the market up earlier this summer, and we had a correction lower. Now round 2 of the government buying program is happening. But it's not just the cheese that's pushing prices higher. We have strong exports. And from January through July of this year, exports up nearly 10%. And our July exports were the best July exports that we've ever had on record. So we have strong dairy demand, strong cheese demand here at home that's leading the Class 3 prices higher. And the October Class 3 price today even was able to close above the $20 level, which is significant. We've got barrel prices working higher on the cheese, which is supportive for Class 3. And if we can continue to see this going into next week, technically speaking, if that cheese price can keep moving higher, technical upside, takes us back up closer to $23 or $24 milk for October, November prices, which would actually match the higher prices that we saw back in July and August. So the outlook for milk right now still continues to be fantastic. I would caution production is fierce. Production was up over 1.8% on the last milk production report. So we are producing ample supplies. If there's any sign that the demand starts to linger, prices are going to fall quick.
And that's it for a deeper look into the markets. A lot going on. Harvest season getting people talking. I'll continue to keep an eye on it. Mike?
The governor of Louisiana says the Mississippi River accounts for more than $750 billion of the nation's economy. Big Muddy also supports nearly 2.5 million jobs. Those are impressive numbers, but a new project will likely add even more to everyone's bottom line. John Torpy has the story.
A hurdle for shipping along the lower Mississippi River is being removed, and it is anticipated to provide benefits for businesses all along the aquatic superhighway.
So we estimate that farmers could generate an additional $461 million every year, not because supply has changed, not because demand has changed, but just simply because the supply chain, our transportation system, is more economical and more efficient.
The final stretch of the Mississippi River before it meets the Gulf of Mexico is home to some of the most important ports in North America. Producers of a vast array of commodities from across the country use the Mississippi River as an entry point to ship their products worldwide. This month, the state of Louisiana and the Army Corps of Engineers teamed up to deepen the shipping channel from 45 to 50 feet, making way for bigger ships and more commerce.
And we are connected to every state along the Mississippi River. And the 256 miles that this dredging will work, I think will really create an additional $1 million+ per vessel in a sense of capacity, because they can now go deeper, which means they can carry more, which means they can sell more for the same shipping cost of that one vessel.
The Mississippi River Ship Channel Dredging Project comes with a price tag of just over $270 million. A majority of the bill will be paid with federal funds, but the state of Louisiana and a number of agricultural groups are sharing some of the costs. The Army Corps of Engineers calculates the work will pay for itself in 3 years. The project is expected to return $7.20 for every dollar spent constructing and maintaining the channel. Mike Steenhoek, executive director of the Soy Transportation Coalition, says the deeper channel will have far-reaching benefits for the rest of the country.
And our analysis highlighted that you'll be able to put an additional 500,000 bushels of soybeans per vessel. You often find in some of these ocean vessels 2.4 million bushels of soybeans per vessel. This can easily push it up to 2.9 million bushels of soybeans by just going an additional 5 feet. And so you're just improving the economics of the supply chain. We estimate that's going to be a 13-cent per bushel savings.
The project is expected to benefit the ports of Baton Rouge, Bachman, New Orleans, and the Port of South Louisiana by providing deep draft access to larger vessels currently moving through the newly expanded Panama Canal.
We become uncompetitive and unreliable, and that hurts our farmers. And when you become uncompetitive, unreliable, they'll go someplace else. These countries that are buying our grain will find another place to buy it that's more reliable and more competitive.
For products headed to overseas markets, a shallow channel was forcing some cargo vessels to leave the port at less than full capacity. According to Oakland, the smaller loads are costing shippers millions of dollars, depending on how much cargo has to be left on the dock. For ships coming into port, some cargo can be delayed due to the depth of the water in the channel. Heavier loads have to wait until it's safe to allow ships to navigate upriver.
Now, what happens when a ship's coming in fully loaded at 45 feet? And there's a 40-foot restriction. It's got to stay outside for a number of days until the restriction is lifted and it can come in. We've had a ship that stayed outside the Mississippi River for 42 days at $25,000 a day.
With the dredging project underway, Oakland is pleased his 3-year-old prediction for attracting new businesses to the area has come true.
We have 17 new industries that have committed to coming into the Port District, and they will spend $23.2 billion building these new industries, which will be utilizing the river to import and export their product.
From the mouth of the Mississippi River, the project will work its way north past New Orleans and stop at the port of Baton Rouge. Along the way, material pulled from the bottom of the channel will be used to help build up shorelines and restore wetlands. The Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority is advising the Army Corps of Engineers and the Louisiana Department of Transportation and Development on the best locations for additional material to be placed along the Pelican State's coastline.
It passes through a very fragile environment that is coastal Louisiana that many folks are aware has been losing land at a tremendous rate. It's really a tragedy and a catastrophe of national significance. Nonetheless, that environment protects that transportation system through which it travels. And without our coastal wetlands, without our coastal ecosystem protecting that transportation system, it would be obviously a tremendous blow to the state, to the nation's economy.
Haas estimates the project could produce enough material to restore 15,000 acres of coastal wetlands.
or when we have a situation where we're dredging a lot of sediments, which of course would be the case in a Mississippi River deepening project. We want to be able to capitalize on that and use those to help build coastal wetlands that are good for the ecosystem, good for our environment, but again, in turn, good for our economy as they help protect that transportation system.
You don't want to grab a shark by the tail because that shark won't eat, that shark won't do anything, and it has to keep moving to do that. The lifeblood of our agricultural economy and our manufacturing and petrochemical world is about moving that product from one stage to the next, so each of those stages can compoundly add value. So I would tell you, we're all connected.
Making the river deeper, amazing story. Well, next time on the show, 200 years ago, much of the land in our country was prairie land. Over time, millions of acres were plowed under to feed us or paved over to move us. Now, though, one special company in Minnesota is helping to fuel a movement to restore some of that land to its original beauty. It's called Prairie Moon, and it's one of the most unusual businesses in the nation. That's next time on Farm Week. Remember, if you missed a story, look for past episodes of Farm Week on our website at farmweek.tv. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube as well. We'll see you next week. Stay healthy. Thanks for watching.